here this morning. Make sure you're looking at what you should be. There you go. All right, so let me welcome you this morning. If this is your first webinar, I'm Keith Mathis, and so welcome to our monthly webinar. This month, we're going to be talking about the PMO, and it's entitled Project Management Office Marching Orders. Now, you might be working for a PMO, or you might be the PMO director, or you might be reporting to a PMO, but the Project Management Office is going through a huge transition across the world, where people are starting to look at project management offices with a higher degree of respect than what they do and what they maybe have in the past. Now, in your situation, maybe they've always looked at it as with respect, but in some cases, the project management office has kind of been like a secondary kind of thing. Let me explain it like that. So maybe your organization has had a project management office, but they didn't have any power. Maybe didn't even have a budget. It was kind of like an extra duty somebody had the responsibility for. Many organizations who have seen struggles in their projects are starting to realize that if they can put a strong project management office in and some strong people in running and working with that and working with project managers and so forth, that they can actually increase the potential of their projects coming in successfully. Now, obviously, we're going to talk about the full extreme here, because some are going to be very weak project management offices that have no power, and then some will have a great deal of power. So as we look at this, let's talk about 5 stages of a PMO. First off, project office, a basic PMO standard, and then we'll talk about an advanced PMO, because obviously what I'm describing to you here is more of that advanced PMO. But let's give you a description of each of these. So let's start off with stage 1, which is going to be very low level, the project office. The project office is not anything wrong with any of these, and if they fit your culture and they're working for an organization, that's exactly the one you should be using. However, we all know that sometimes we're frustrated with how projects are struggling, and we're frustrated that sometimes the lack of oversight or the lack of accountability. And so with a project office, project oversight is one of the things that they will do. They will achieve project deliverables, objectives for cost, schedule, resource utilization. They might deal with one or more projects and have one or more project managers connected to them, but this is going to be pretty small in most cases. And sometimes they don't even call it the project office. It's just, it's Betty who oversees and works with the project teams, and she reports maybe to a manager to let that person know how things are going. Nothing wrong with this if this fits for your organization and your projects are being successful. But a lot of times for big organizations to have something like this, doesn't have enough rigor for you. It doesn't have enough structure to really be able to help you. And the people who have these positions normally have them in addition to other positions. And so that usually creates a little bit of a challenge as well. Then there's a second stage PMO, which is considered a basic PMO, project oversight, but here is where you start seeing process control put into play. And so what you have here is that you've got people who are starting to try to drive the projects with some type of project management methodology. Now, let me speak to the methodology piece. I'm not talking about somebody who's driving everything based on PMBOK. PMBOK is nothing wrong with that, but PMBOK, it could be overkill for some of your projects. And so, in other words, they're starting to help put together a methodology that everyone is starting to follow. If you don't have that, that's something for you to look at, because many of the times the projects there is left up to the project manager how they want to run it, what kind of processes they're going to use or not use, and so there's no standardization. That's the point I'm trying to make here. And many times the standardization will help your projects go to the next level, and it doesn't mean that everybody has to use all 10 processes or whatever the case may be. It means, though, that we select from the same 10 processes, and so I only use 6 for this project, you use 8 for a different project, and so forth. But it does mean that we all understand and are using the same processes, but with whatever fits for that project. So they provide a standard repeatable PM methodology for use across all projects. Multiple projects and multiple project managers can be part of this. You might even have a program manager position there. If you don't have that position, you're probably reporting to a sponsor or a manager. Could be a functional manager who has that responsibility. And so this is kind of like a part-time PMO, part-time PMO staff. So in other words, you've got more structure than the other one, but the point is it's still pretty small in some cases here. Stage 3 would be what we would call the standard PMO. They're providing oversight, process control, and support. And so they know what kind of processes are being used. They might not be mandating that every process is used in every project, but they understand why you're not doing this particular process in your project. They establish capability, infrastructure to support and govern a cohesive project environment. And when you start getting out of stage 3 PMO, you're starting to notice that they're emphasizing project management methodology. They're emphasizing certain types of training, certain types of processes are going to be very standard in this. And then when you get to stage 4, which is your advanced PMO, they are absolutely providing project oversight, process control, and support business maturity. They are trying to grow up project managers to where they understand how to run a project. They're trying to grow up a team to where they understand how to do this. They apply an integrated of comprehensive project management capability to achieve business objectives. Now, as maybe you're along the path here, but you're not quite to an advance. An advance does not automatically mean that everything's perfect and every project's going to be successful. There's no silver bullet in project management. I mean, all of us have had projects that have struggled. All of us have had projects that have been successful. But a PMO is looking at trying to put the best foot forward across the board. And that's one of the reasons why they will be involved in project management training. They will be involved in trying to expand people to think differently. Those lessons learned are going to make a huge difference with this type of stage, because they're looking at the lessons learned, and they are actively working with management to try to change those processes so that other projects that come down the pipeline are going to run more smoothly. So an advanced PMO is absolutely where you're shooting for, but in your organization, you might not need this level of structure. And so that's okay. But the point is, you want as much structure as you need for the level of projects you run. Now, in the advanced PMO, the project environment, you'd have multiple projects, project managers, program managers. You might even have an actual PMO director, and a dedicated PMO could be technical and support staff for certain type of projects. And so the point is that if you've got this level here, this level of PMO, they are working not only with the methodology, which is obviously going to be a big driver, but they're going to be working on the vendor side a lot of times too. So if you're procuring a vendor to come in and do a portion of this, they have a lot of input, or they have a lot of knowledge in that procurement piece. Some organizations, when they get to this top level piece, the actual PMO is almost like a PMO slash VMO. A VMO is a vendor management organization. And so sometimes the PMO absolutely is controlling who and what vendors are working on certain projects, where procurement might be done for other areas of the organization in and through procurement. But some organizations have even advanced to where this is a PMO slash procurement for projects all in the same place. But that might not be you either, and that's okay. But that just shows you the evolution of some of this. Now, when we talk about PMO, a PMO is really going to focus on methodology, but here's where a major change is happening. And those of you who work and run projects, you're seeing some of this. On one side, when we talk about methodology, on the one side, if you are a traditional project management organization, then you are driving waterfall or traditional projects. And so that's going to be, we interview the customer up front, we come up with the scope of work, we go to a WBS, we come up with our estimates, and then of course you do all your different plans. Once we finish our plans, we're going to baseline it, and then we're going to execute, we're going to monitor and control, and then we're going to hand off the project to the customer at the end. All of that is considered waterfall. All of that is basic project management, traditional. Okay, nothing wrong with that. However, many of you maybe are starting to realize that there are different pockets within that organization, and the PMO is going to notice this first, that the waterfall just doesn't fit. There's too many changes, too many things are going in so many different directions. So you get over here on the agile side. And so under the umbrella of agile, you could have Scrum, you could have Kanban, you could have any of those other type of methodologies. So we've just given you a broad perspective here, but it's not waterfall, okay? So you're having to do something that's not waterfall. And so you're trying to do it to where you've got the capability to make all these changes that you need. Okay, so in PMOs, why is this influencing a PMO? Because the PMO of yesteryear, which mainly focused on, let's say, waterfall as being the main methodology, and a lot of times you even heard PMOs PMOs speak out, well, we would never use anything except waterfall. They're now having to retract that a little bit and look at some pockets to do an agile type of methodology, or at least a hybrid type of methodology. Now, maybe you are not set up, maybe you're a very formal organization, top down structure, the whole deal, okay? Very much almost like military. That doesn't mean that you might not find yourself having to do some type of hybrid to where you're doing some agile, but not 100% agile because of the reporting structure. And that's a lot of times connected to the PMO. The PMO a lot of times is brought in to help oversee the agile project with the project managers and the teams and so forth. But they're also having to then dissect how they're going to report the right information upline in that traditional format. So this is a huge shift that you're starting to see with PMOs. Now, some of the roles of the major PMO would be oversight role, training, mentoring, auditing, recovery. All of these can be some of those pieces here. So let me give you a few of these just in this quick time that we have. Let's talk about oversight. Oversight is probably one of the main roles for a PMO. Now, obviously, those of you who work in a PMO, you can go from a real light oversight where you're like a recommendation committee, or you're over here on the other side where you're like Attila the Hun, where you're slaughtering people who don't abide by it. So when we talk about project oversight, we're talking about someone who you're going to have to bring the people skills to the table, as you probably already do, and that you're trying to coach people, mentor people to take them to that next level in project management oversight. The oversight is not just on the vendor side, and sometimes that's the mistake. It's going to be on the organizational side too. So as a PMO, you're almost like an internal consultant on both sides. You're trying to give oversight to make sure the vendor does what they're supposed to do according to the contract, but you're also trying to make sure that the organizational team that works for maybe your organization is also complying to the contract terms to do what they're supposed to do. So standards and metrics are going to be a huge piece of this. So you implement project management standards, examine standard sources. Primary purpose of introducing standards is to improve the project in technical and business performance. And that's what the PMO is looking at a lot of times. Now, maybe it's a technical PMO and you think, well, it's just technical. And maybe that is the dominant one of these three, because usually one of these is a little more dominant. But don't kid yourself, the PMO a lot of times, not only now, but maybe even in the future, will be brought in to not just look at technical projects, but we'll start looking at business projects if they start being more successful. And so when you look at organizations, rather than just think project management's for my pot of technical projects over here, your business customer or your business side needs these same methodologies with some, obviously some changes and adjustments, but they need that same structure and some of these same methodologies. Now, you're going to examine standard sources, consider project management practices, project management maturity. So let's talk about maturity a little bit here. So how mature are your people in project management practices? Are you just starting off kind of in those baby steps, or are they kind of in the middle, or are they really mature on that side to where they really can take a project and run with it? You probably have a variety of people all the way through, but our goal would be to try to deepen that content with them and deepen them to where they're going to have an opportunity to be able to grow and understand more. What's their technical capability compared where they are, where you want them to be? Let's say at the end of a year, where do you want them to be? Project management competencies, organizational certification. Is there any of these that you're needing to take that project management team and that project manager to the next level? Now, when we talk about organizational certification, it could be something outside, such as PMP and all these kind of certifications that are offered, but it might be more so of an internal thing to where you're trying to make sure that this person has this level of competency, and in your own language and in your own organization, they are a certified project manager because they have certain skills and can run that project in a certain way. All of this comes back to the anchor of being able to conduct benchmarking. Where you are now compared to where you want that organization of a project management organization to be. It provides measurements to verify whether applicable standards are being achieved. So what are you wanting to benchmark? Methodology would be one of those, but the core skill competency of your people are going to have to be a piece of it. Now, you're not going to make everybody a doctorate degree in project management, so don't even try that. but you definitely are wanting to escalate or increase those skills in your people and what skills will benefit them the most. Also, determining the project metric requirements. Every organization has certain requirements, and the ones that are most common that we all know about is going to be, are we on time and are we on budget? And those are nothing wrong with that. We obviously have to know, are we on time and are we on budget? However, there's other types of standards and metrics that we're trying to measure to make sure that we're moving the organization of the PMO along in maturity. And so looking at process improvement metrics, how do you know your processes, or are they improving at all? That's the reason why we do a lessons learned, is to improve our processes so that there's less hurdles or barriers from for our people as they're working a project. What about project performance metrics? What about communication? Are we even measuring anything on communication? We measure, are we on time, are we on budget, because that's what management demands, but are there other metrics that would be beneficial to us? What about business management metrics? For an example, do you have any metrics on handoff? Your people are good, they do the project, but maybe the handoff is the clumsy piece. So when we look at our slate of metrics, do we even measure anything on that handoff or customer satisfaction? If not, that could be an eye-opening experience. We think we do great, and the customer says, man, I hate it. It's a dump and run kind of thing. Nobody talks to us. They won't return our calls after they hand the project off. So those could be metrics that we have to look at as well. So let's take a couple of these and kind of dig a little deeper in those. Okay, so let's talk about training and education. So establishing an internal training program. So can a PMO establish an internal training program and never bring a vendor in? The answer is absolutely yes. You can do that. But here's the thing, you're going to have to take your most experienced people that can translate that information and that knowledge that they have and that can pass it on to someone else. So they have to have the knowledge, but they have to be willing to pass that on. And so you're going to need that type of caliber of person to be able to do some of this. So assessing the training needs of your organization. So is it in project management competency? Is it leadership, managerial capability? Is it technical skills or knowledge? Is it executive or senior manager awareness? Is it contractor participation? There could be a lot of different pieces here, but you don't have to assume that you've got to hire a contractor. A contractor could be brought in, obviously, but you've got a lot of reinforcement you can do with the people you have. For an example, brown bag lunch, any type of short type of training that you could do for your people. Technical skills. So what kind of software do your people use? Have they ever been trained in Primavera or Microsoft Project or whatever software you're using that you and your company feel that is the most appropriate? So have you ever trained them in that? We're frustrated that people don't use it to its capacity, but if I haven't trained them, then that might be part of the reason for this. So then once we decide some of the key areas, and I would probably look at all the different things and say, okay, here's the 3 things I'd like for the people in my PMO and my project managers and their teams to get this year. Then you come up with your project, with your training plan for this. And it's like a little mini project. And so what's my core project management courses that I want to teach? And so here's going to be the 3. And then advanced optional project management courses. We're going to do a technical course. The person who knows how to run Primavera the best, they're going to teach 3 courses, 1 hour long, on the basics of Primavera, and be able to pitch this to management so that management sees that you're doing it internally. You're not spending any money outside, but you are taking people away from their job to be able to train other people. And then you're looking, then could be the next level could be your professional development courses. Do you have people who are team members now who have the skills to be project managers? So is there a fundamentals of project management course that we can teach our people internally? And then, of course, obviously, executive courses, workshops, a lot of different things that you can add to that. But those are some fundamental things that most PMOs are going to be looking at and are going to be using. The other side of this would be developing those training courses internally. Instructor-led classroom training is probably is looked at as being the best because people can ask questions. They have the capability to be able to interact with the person who's doing this. Instructor-led e-courses are good, but always the challenge with this is that lack of interaction with that instructor. You don't have the capability to be able to ask that question. And of course, CD-ROM or any kind of online program is fine, but you have the same problem with that as well. I apologize. I've got a terrible cough, and once it starts, it's hard to stop. So I apologize for putting a cough drop in my mouth right now, but once it starts, I'll have trouble. So any of these courses can be beneficial, but you're still having to have somebody in that role of coach and mentor for them. Let's go look at conducting and managing the programs. How often do you want these programs to run for your people? So you can prepare and distribute course completion certificates. Make your certificates up yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're running it yourself, give them a certificate of completion. Many organizations have a level of certification for their people that they have to go through certain courses, and then they're certified internally. You don't have to have an outside organization do that. Make your certificate programs online like crazy, and you can make a certificate. But the biggest thing is not the certificate. The biggest thing is what you're going to include that they have to do in order to get that certificate or to be certified by your organization. Monitor any unsuccessful course participation. You're going to experience the same thing everybody does. You'll have some people who'll start, but they're struggling with it because not everybody's geared for that training. And so you might think it's good for them, but trying to get them to complete it, it will be a challenge. And then manage training mandates and withdrawals if people decide they're not going to go. Now, obviously, this thing can grow to a point where you actually have a training department in your organization who's doing part of this. And if you already have that, then partner with them on how you can maybe get them to do some of the training that you want your people to have. But the point is, you've got to get the skills into your people, and it can't all be on the job training. Some of it's going to have to be taught in order to take them to that next level. And then evaluate that training program. What's the instructor performance? What about administration? How do we streamline the administration of this? Course evaluation review, course development review, business contract or agreement review. You're looking at everything that you're needing to be able to get them. But the average PMO could come up with 3 courses that would be standard for every project manager and every team member, and you would see your projects jump to that next level if you chose to do that. Okay, so let's go to something that we have where we have the expertise internally. Okay, so like a mentoring role. So a mentor is someone who has the expertise, who's open to sharing that information with people who are less experienced. They're not. You need to look for a person who's not conceited on how great they are, and you need to look for somebody who cares about people. They're going to have to have a little bit of a soft approach in some cases as they're working with people because the people don't know what they don't know. And so this mentor is going to be pointing out certain things to pass along. So establishing project management mentoring programs can be very beneficial. It's all internal, no outside vendors. So you develop the mentoring approach, you define the mentoring and student relationship. And so you've got project practices and professional side of this. The mentoring does not have to be something that's lasting 5 hours a week. It could be something to where they meet 45 minutes with their mentor, and then they can ask questions as the time goes on. But the mentor has to be someone who's willing to share that expertise and to be able to pass that knowledge over. Structure the mentoring time, and here's some of the basic questions that will help. What is the purpose of the mentoring? It's not to shoot the bull, even though they're going to be friendly with one another and they're going to connect. Okay. But what's the purpose? The purpose is skill development. Who are going to be the students? How many mentors do you think you need? And sometimes just asking if anyone would like to be part of a mentoring program to be the mentor. And would anybody like to be part of the mentoring program to be connected to a mentor will automatically get your first group going, because you've got some people who your generation your millennials and your Z's are very open to mentoring in most of the surveys. And so this is a very easy, soft approach for you to have. And so how many mentors do you think you need? What is the duration of the mentoring program? What kind of skills or knowledge do you think is needed? And so if you're getting an experienced person to be part of this, and you're asking for some volunteers on the first run or two, that's going to help you see what gaps you need. That's going to help you evolve this a little bit. Now, here's some of the basic responsibilities of a mentor. Okay. To set and maintain expectations. The purpose of that mentoring program is to be talking and taking skill development and being able to get people comfortable with those new skills to where they're doing it on their own. They need to be available, need to be on time. Whatever, if I've got an appointment with someone and I'm their mentor, I need to be on time. It needs to be an emergency for me to miss that, not just that I've gotten busy. And so we need to maintain contact, provide listening and support, be courteous, considerate, be open to the students' needs, their opinions, be willing to apply extra effort with them, alerting the student to issues or opportunities that we see that they maybe have not thought about, share success and failure experiences with them, and also give and receive constructive feedback. And constructive feedback is both sides of feedback. When I'm working with my doctoral students and my graduate students, I see the negative because, and many of times we as project managers, we see what's wrong with something. That's just kind of built into us because we're measuring everything. I hope that makes sense to you with what I'm saying. But you do. That's why you're good at what you do. You measure stuff. I don't care what's happening. You're measuring how we can do that better or how we can remove a step. And so my tendency in anything I'm doing with my students, especially, is I'll see the negative of the paper or the negative on the dissertation and stuff. So that's fine. They need to know that negative, and as a mentor, your students are going to need to know that negative as well. But we need to say the positive as well. You might see 15 positive, but what do we talk about? We're going to talk about that negative. So you need to make sure that you include the positive. You're doing great here. This is really a good idea. I like the way you did this. And you name all these things. And then let's work on this right here. Here's where I think we can change this and adjust this and benefit this. Student responsibilities on the mentoring side. And this would be almost like a one-page thing. Here's the responsibilities of the mentor. Here's the responsibilities of the student, is to welcome mentors' interest and guidance, be proactive in learning. In other words, it's not all on the mentor, it's going to be on the student side to ask the right questions too. Accept, react to constructive feedback, identify, examine needs and deficiencies, be proactive in contributing ideas, address failures and successes. And so that student has some responsibilities there as well to be able to help guide this. So if the student's not getting something that they want to know, they need to be asking rather than just the mentor has to guess or has to spoon feed them for this information. Then establishing the project management mentoring program, you could determine the mentoring sourcing process. How are we going to source who's going to be our mentor? And it might be a rotation system on some of your mentors, actually. Create mentor positions on the PMO staff. That's going to be a logical spot for this. Establish a rationale, a mentoring program, a pool of qualified mentors, acquire senior project management consultants, even internally that could be mentors or even externally. All of this can be set up without anybody coming in though. And so you can definitely start moving this process along without any outside help. Okay, so let's put our auditing hat on. Many of you do this and you do it with week in and week out with your projects. And so you set up a auditing capability. And so you determine project auditing needs. Now, just because you can measure it does not mean you have to audit it. And that's one of the challenges I'll see. Why collect that data if that data does not give us any information that is different than anything else, and management doesn't want it? Nobody's really looking at that data. It doesn't make a lot of sense that I'm spending a lot of time with that data unless we're getting benefits out of it. So every time we collect data and analyze it, we're wanting to have an output of a great benefit for this. So determining the project auditing needs, project management audit might be part of it, project performance audit. So if we're looking at project management audit, we're auditing the methodologies is what we're doing. If we're looking at project performance audit, then we're looking at how are we doing. So for an example, let's say for an example, you are auditing the project management audit and you start realizing, you know what, we're not doing very good in gathering requirements. See, that would be a project management audit. And so how did you know you're not doing very good in gathering requirements? Well, because the last 3 projects, when we get into the execution point, we discover requirements that nobody knew about. So how did that happen? Could the customer have just come up with that? Of course, we've all seen that. I'm sure you don't have any customers like that, but we've all seen that. But can it just surface? Sure. But sometimes the reason it surfaced is because we didn't do a good job on the interview process on gathering the requirements. We got in a hurry. We didn't really interview all the right people. And so then we start finding out in execution that here's additional requirements, which create change orders. And we all hate all of this stuff happening there. So those would be some pieces that you would be able to spot. Review of project management methodology overall. For an example, you've been waterfall, and so now all of a sudden you start realizing, is there a place for some of the agile or scrum methodologies? Is there a place for us to do it even in a hybrid type situation? Hybrid is where so many things are going. And so to kind of give you a visual here as a project management office, the project comes into the pipeline, and probably one of the first steps that I see happening, at least in the future for a PMO, is to look and decide which methodology is going to fit this project best. Agile, or is it going to be waterfall, or is it going to be something more in the middle of a hybrid, is what it's going to take to be able to be successful. Because we don't need to be connected to just the methodology. In other words, the methodology is just a tool. Your goal is success on that project. So if a hybrid methodology gets that project out the door faster, you want to be supportive of that. If Agile gets it out faster, you want to be supportive of that. So methodology, so that means that if you don't know anything about hybrid or Agile, those are areas of training that you would be picking up as well. Then identifying project auditing resources, project managers, project team members who would do a good audit, internal auditors. A lot of people don't like internal auditors because they don't think that they can share the gaps with internal coworkers or peers. I'm not somebody who believes that. I think they need to be trained, but I think you've got good people. Most people have good people working on projects, and so they will have a tendency to be able to do. They can do the audit, and they could share that information to somebody that they work with, and they would do it in a non-offensive way. I don't think that they would hide it. I don't think it always has to be the outside person. External collaborative auditors, sure. But once we go out external, now we're paying somebody to do a piece of this. Or external regulatory auditors. Regulatory even makes more sense to me because regulations are changing, and if we're having to comply to some regulation, like many of the power plants around the country and many of the utility companies that are running projects, they're having to comply with regulatory things that a change at the drop of a hat. For that to have an outside auditor come in even makes sense because that person should be up on the newest regulations. So in establishing a project audit performance points, routine project audit points, triggered project audit points, and discretionary project audit points. So let's talk about the three of these. So routine, it's what we already do in most cases. You have certain routine project audit points that you're monitoring as a project manager, as a PMO, even as a team member. You're doing it to a point. You're checking to see how are we doing. CPI, SPI, all your earned value kind of calculations. Those are pretty much routine auditing points that you're doing internally within your project. But then if something happens, that trigger auditing point would be something to where, okay, we need to do this type of analysis. Let me give you an example of this. So a triggered a project auditing point, let's say for an example, we run across some kind of problem and we put a fix into place, we make a change order, we get everything going trying to fix this problem in the project, but we all of a sudden discover after we start working on this, it didn't fix the problem. That would be a triggered project audit point to where we would go back and we would look and see why did we do the 5 why or a root cause analysis on that problem, and if we didn't do it, why did we not do it? So see, that would be a trigger. As long as the problem was fixed with what we did, it wouldn't be a trigger. But if our fix is not really a fix, that would be a trigger point to go back in and look, what happened, how did we miss that? And then discretionary project audit point could be just a determination that the PMO does to where they're going to look at documentation for the projects for 5 out of the last 20 projects, or they're going to look at closeout standards and closeout reviews for the last 5 projects. That's just a discretionary kind of point. Also, conducting the project audit. Interviews. An audit is not just looking at data. You've got to come up with the data sometimes. So sometimes you might be doing an actual face-to-face interview or a video interview to find out what went good, what went bad, and what they do different. And sometimes just understanding why. Why did this team take an approach that's different than what we normally take? There could be very justifiable reasons, but we don't know why. If you're looking at the documentation and you can't tell why, that could be an interview. Observations, where we watch people, what they do. Further document reviews, where you're looking at the actual documentation itself. Analysis, even internal audit feedback. What should they document? What should they not document? This is an issue on many traditional projects. One person's documenting every time somebody sneezes in a meeting, and the next person's not documenting hardly anything. So you've got the full range, even in what is documented within a normal project, in a normal documentation process or database for a project. Preparing project audit reports. You can you can absolutely swamp people with reports. And so you're wanting to create some kind of dashboard that makes sense and dashboard that means something. So an executive summary, obviously upper management is almost always going to want executive summary, milestones, those type of things, high level. They're not in the weeds. Now there's problems, they're in the weeds with you a lot of times, okay? But they're, as long as things are running semi-smooth, then they're going to be high level. But your PMO is going to really need a little bit of both. They want an executive summary because they're going to be passing that on up to management, but they also are wanting the data to where they can monitor these projects looking through their eyes. So what is our auditing approach? What is our auditing findings of all these projects that we're checking on? What's our recommendations? And the recommendation that should be coming out of the PMO that they have to look at every time is, how can we be better? How can we put more project management skills in our people? Where's the gaps in that core competencies that our people don't have? Now, a lot of times we think, well, we will hire somebody who has that. If you have one SME that has that, you are automatically subject to losing that person for somebody else trying to pay them more money. So you've got to be able to take that person and pass those skills around. You don't want just one person knowing how to do something in most cases. So let's go a little bit further here to the project recovery. PMOs are getting connected to project recovery like crazy, because you're looking at 65 to 80% of the projects are struggling, are coming in late, over budget, are just flat out struggling. So that puts us into that project recovery mode of how to get the project back on track, because it's so high profile. Our management, it's a top project for, according to management. So recovery efforts are focused on this. And so developing recovery assessment process, identifying recovery indicators, scope, cost, schedule, resource utilization, quality, risk. Every one of these bullet points here, you would have metrics to look and see how did the project, or what the project did in these areas. And so did we not do a risk analysis or risk assessment, and the risk actually happened because we didn't even know they were coming? Did quality bite the dust? Are our resources that we thought we had, were they actually obligated to another project someplace else? I mean, we've all worked recovery without even calling it recovery, to just try to salvage a project. And all of these components can make or break a project. And so you're wanting to know what the real problem is, because you're going to make recommendations from this to management and to the PMO. The other thing is assessing the project, identifying problem areas. So assessing the current business interests, their issues, assessing the current project work plan, the current project team, key stakeholders. Every project is struggling a little bit right now. Now we can do a lot of things virtually, but for those projects that really need that engagement, the interaction, us being in the same room, I'm sure you're struggling a little bit. That's just kind of the nature of the beast right now. But everything won't stay the way it is right now. If the projections are correct, by June you're going to start seeing some things change. I'm so thankful to see the all of the infections are dropping here in Missouri like crazy, and so it's looking like it's dropping around the country. So those are positive things, but everything's not going to just snap and be right back. So by June, I think we're going to see a little more, but by the end of the year, you're going to start seeing more and more of the engagement that we've had with our projects to kind of pull everything back together. But right now, everything is different because of what externally has hit us. The other thing about the project recovery is preparing recovery decision package, project recovery assessment activities, statement of project condition, and project recovery recommendations. Now, in this particular piece here, this is almost like a little miniature project. You've got a recovery manager. Normally you'll have a project team. It might be some of the same people, but in recovery, a lot of times your purpose is very single-minded. You're trying to pick up the 6 weeks that this project is off track. And then after you hit those 6 weeks, most of the time, the idea is we'll switch it right back over and the project can keep going the way it's been going. But you're looking at, here's the scope of work in this recovery package to get us back on track for the next 6 weeks. And so it's going to follow a different set of rules, guidelines, and a different plan than what we've been following the entire time. Then you're trying to coordinate the recovery decisions. Project manager, project sponsor, you've got to have those connections. Project team members, vendor or contractor managers, if you're working with them, the customer, and then resource managers to be able to get people on that team to be able to catch the project up. Now, and when we talk about project recovery, normally the projects that you're trying to recover is not every project. It's going to be those projects that are driving the strategic plan of the organization or of that department. It's going to be driving those high priority projects. Some of your lower priority projects, you're not going to spend the money and the time to try to catch some of those up. Some of those you'll let them be late because you've got your resources up here driving the most important. But in order to do that, these projects have to be prioritized. And we have to get away from all of them are number one priorities. We have to be able to let the team know this is number one, this is number two, and this is number three, so that everybody's working on the most important thing at all times. And that's a challenge when a PMO is pulling projects and getting projects from all these different departments and groups, because everybody thinks their project is a number one priority. Now, the next piece that we want to look at is then planning and conducting the actual project recovery itself. The PMO a lot of times is really providing a lot of oversight right here, because you want the project to get back on track. You're putting a recovery effort together. So that's a high priority project. Engagement of the PMO is going to be extremely high here. So you're establishing project recovery team. It might not be the same team that was working on it before. You might have senior management involved in this. And if it's a high enough priority project, you will have senior management on it. You're going to have project team members, vendors, contractors, customers. But the point is there's a lot of scrutiny on this type of project. So you find yourself having to really watch and communicate with management on a moment by moment basis in order to get this thing back on track. For the period of the recovery, a lot of times you're spending money in addition to what was automatically budgeted, because you're trying to get this high priority project fixed. In developing the project recovery plan, it's a revised work plan. So it's not just we're throwing a few more resources here. It's a revised work plan because you're trying to catch those 6 weeks up. And so you've got more resources going, you're fast tracking more things, and you're actually crashing portions of the project in order to be to catch up at some point in time. You're going to have to update your risk management plan, because if risk was one of the reasons why you had trouble, that's going to be part of it. Update quality assurance plan and revise the communication plan. Why? You've got different people you're communicating to. Upper management's involved in this thing because they're watching it, they're spending more money, so they're wanting feedback much more regular than what they were getting in the normal project. And then the other piece will be that of stabilizing the project using recovery solution. So the recovery solution is implemented. So that's what we've decided we're going to do to get it back on track for 6 weeks. The stakeholder communication plan is going to be a piece of that. These are the stakeholders we've got to communicate to for those 6 weeks. And then the project tracking and control. We are watching it like a hound dog to make sure we do not miss any of these things during that 6 weeks. So this is a very highly anticipated, highly scrutinized recovery plan. And then change management. We do not want a lot of changes happening if we can keep from it, because every time we've got a change, we're having to readjust. So we don't want a lot of changes. We've already thought about what's the best way to get it back on track. So if we have to have a change, fine, but we want to all be on the same page when we have this change. And so we don't want to take a change lightly as we're trying to do this. And then in concluding the recovery effort, you're going to compile recovery project data, prepare data analysis and recommendations reports, and specify transition activities. Because remember, the recovery team is not trying to run the project to its total conclusion. It's trying to get it back on track. So once we do our 6 weeks to get it back on track, I'm now ready to hand it back off to the project manager and the team so that they can run the project and finish it. We want to be able to transition back to the other things that we were doing. And so so we're used to doing this in a crisis, but the point is that most of the time that crisis is based on a recovery. All right, so let me stop here for just a second and handle a couple of questions and all. We've got a few minutes for that, and questions or comments about anything. Questions or comments? Let me open this up a little bit.
Keith, I've got a question.
Okay.
Um, I think you mentioned earlier something about communication metrics.
Uh-huh.
How would you establish those? Because I'm thinking if you do quantity alone, you're going to end up with a boatload of emails that are really unnecessary, um, as if our email boxes aren't full enough already.
Of course.
So, how would you measure effectiveness of communication, which would be more what you need to do?
Right. The quantity is not, to send 3 times the amount is going to actually complicate things. And so I agree with you. But I think on communication is that's going to be a meeting as part of yourself when you're setting up your stakeholder plan and your communication plan to talk about what are the 4 necessary reports that have to be sent out. That's going to include metrics, and then the dashboard. Here's the dashboard that's going to include those 4 things. And so those are going to be sent out and determining the intervals. That's going to be the other piece of it. Are we sending this out every day, every morning at 10 o'clock? If it's high enough priority, then we might even have a 30-minute meeting every morning to verbally communicate those metrics like that. But you and your team would decide what metrics that needs to be, and you and your team will decide what the dashboard needs to be. But you're absolutely correct. Not more quantity. You want to make sure you're communicating just the right information at that interval there. So that would be the thing that I would do with that piece. And it might be who's the measurements, certain measurements that they specify that they think would tell them the most will be what you include for that piece.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Somebody else have an idea or question? Any other questions from anybody? I'm excited for what I'm seeing with the PMO. The PMOs are evolving. And so, every organization obviously is different. The structure is obviously a little bit different. And some of you are wearing PMO hat on top of, 10, 10 other hats. But the PMOs that the organizations are seeing value in the PMO are letting that PMO evolve. And the PMOs that are evolving are coming to a point to where it can't just be one methodology or the other. They're having to almost look at, okay, can I do a hybrid in some situations? Now, maybe yours is different, and maybe waterfall is the only thing you're ever going to do. But it's amazing in 3 years how many organizations and your state government in particular and federal governments in particular, who thought just even 5 years ago they would never use any of the agile methodologies, or at least using hybrid in some pocket situations. Now, the challenge that you're probably having, and we are too, is hybrid can mean a lot of different things based on the organization, and that's exactly right. And there's not a ton of material and books on hybrid. One of the things that we're wanting to do is create a program on hybrid, but once again, there's just not a lot of additional material out here, and so it looks like we're going to have to create it almost 100% on our own to be able to come up with something. But I say all that to say one thing: at least be open to looking at the other methodologies and could it fit in certain situations. And part of it's going to be the leadership that you give as a PMO, and part of it's going to be how comfortable are you in being able to make that hybrid work in your situation. Um, and so as that evolves, because hybrid's here to stay, it looks like, and so you're going to be faced with this from time to time, and so you want to manage it from the PMO's perspective, all the way down through, rather than just project managers, because the PMO has to be on board with this and know exactly what's happening. Now, let me show you one more thing here, and then I'll get you out of here. Let me share this with you again. Okay. All right. A couple of things for those of you who have people who are needing to go through the boot camps. Our boot camps have really are really doing well with the new material. You know that the change took place. People who are taking a boot camp have to attend a boot camp that is the materials provided by PMI. So they have to use PMI material, and they have to have a PMI authorized instructor. And so we've got all that covered. We've got, and we're doing virtual instructor led. So I'm doing them live. And so we have instructor led virtuals for April and June. And so the early bird is $22.50 is what the early bird price is. For those of you who are non-government. And so the thing is, these are going to be coming up. These are coming up in April and June. Also, for the Agile Certified Professional certification, we've got 2 of those scheduled this year. It's $15.50 for you to attend that boot camp May 12th and 14th through 14th, and also November 8th through the 10th is when we're going to be doing those. And so once again, this is the PMI certification for Agile Certified Professional is what this is called. Now, just to give you one more heads up, and then we'll close here and get you guys out of here. We have a brand new course, 3-day course on Scrum. Scrum is the most popular Agile methodology there is. And so this would be a Scrum, this would be like a foundation to intermediate type course for those of you on Scrum, to where you understand the terminology, the definitions, you start understanding how that works. And of course, you've got several Agile courses that are out, but Scrum is the most popular. We also wrote the new project recovery course. And so the project recovery course, we can do it on site. It's 3 days. We can do it virtually. It's 3 days. But we also, I've just finished cutting this for online. And so it's going to be self-paced online. And Kim is actually installing this onto our online system even as we speak. And so if you discover that you're wanting to take the project recovery, it's built for 3 days. It's registered with PMI as well. But it goes into depth on how to do project recovery, and project recovery is such an issue for us. So I say that to just say, here's some new things coming down the pipeline. And so any last minute questions before I get you guys out of here? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being part of this. I really appreciate having such a good group this morning. And so stay healthy, stay warm while we're doing all of this, and I'll see you next month. Bye, everybody.
Keith, are we going to get a certificate or something?
You do. You get an email from Kim that gives you the code to be able to claim your hours.
Great. Thanks a lot, buddy.
All right, guys. See ya. Y'all take care.
Thank you.